chicken nugget. Come on. I'm more Japanese than this.
It's 2018, and while the organic, raw, and natural food movements have never been stronger,
I just want to say
Go
you're
back.
the
Can you
most
turn the camera off?
human being on this planet.
Sit here.
Shame on you for supporting the fur industry.
for most people with normal diets, at least some of the food that they consume regularly is really stretching the definition of the term food in the first place. From the chemicals meant to keep food fresh, to the combination of some really nasty natural processes and ingredients,
Hey, Panini Head, are you listening to me?
Yes.
You're gonna kill someone. I'm eating here.
there are a ton of different foods out there that people wouldn't touch with someone else's tongue if they really took the time to read the ingredients, and then search for what those ingredients actually are on a chemistry website.
Is Wayne Brady gonna have the choke?
So let's take a look at the top 10 most off-putting food facts that may change the way that you eat forever.
Breast milk, you made my day.
Jelly beans that shine.
How are you today? I'm Mr. Jellybean.
Hi, Mr. Jellybean. I'm Morty.
If you had to make a short list of the things in this world that most people would rather starve than actually eat, most bugs would make everyone's top 10, despite their supposed high protein amounts. So when you're reaching into a bag of candy, the last thing you're thinking about is bugs or beetles. But that's exactly what makes some candies as shiny as they are, namely jelly beans. The shine that you see on the outside of jelly beans is called shellac, which is actually made from the excretions of female lac insects, which look kind of like a cricket mixed with a scorpion mixed with Satan. While that's not actually the poop of the lac, it is close enough to make you wonder just how important the shine on a jelly bean really is.
Stop! You're making me really uncomfortable.
Stop fighting me. Just let this happen.
If it's really all for the aesthetics, then perhaps we can just go without it. However, jelly beans are known to stick together even when covered in shellac, so removing it would probably mean that you'd have to store your jelly beans in the fridge, as heat and humidity perpetuate this problem. That may sound like a pain, but it's a small price to pay for not having to remember that you're basically eating the feces of the bug from hell every time you go to the movie theater. Before we get any grosser, how about taking a minute to hit that subscribe button and notification bell? Chicken nuggets.
Welcome to McDonald's. Can I take your order?
Yeah, I'd like to get a 10-piece McNugget and a bunch of the Szechuan sauce, like as much as you're allowed to give me.
Be honest, before you even started watching this video, you definitely expected to see chicken nuggets appear somewhere in it.
Oh my god!
Either because of the fact that chickens don't have nuggets as part of their bodies, or because you saw that infamous pink slime video that went viral a few years ago. Beyond the Deus Ex Machina from Ghostbusters 2,
It looks like a giant Jello mold.
I hate Jello.
Oh, come on, there's always room for Jello.
chicken nuggets are just gross, as they're basically the hot dogs of the chicken world, thanks to the fact that they're basically comprised of leftover chicken products, called chicken slurry. At least pink slime has a nice ring to it. Chicken slurry is a liquefied meat product that its defenders say are the best way to use the whole chicken. But there's a reason why people don't eat the whole chicken, and there's really no better explanation as to why than the existence of chicken slurry itself.
I'll go out and I'll find some more of that Mulan Szechuan teriyaki dipping sauce, Morty. Because that's what this is all about.
We need to call the police. This is out of control.
The FDA allows for a certain level of what?
Oh, rats.
They say that ignorance is bliss, and that's because the more a person learns about life or reality, typically the more depressed they become about the state of the world.
Ignorance is bliss.
There may be no better example of that than the fact that the FDA actually has a maximum allotted rodent hair per 100 grams of food product, and it isn't 0. That's because rodents, namely rats, are extremely smart and capable of surviving pretty much anything. They're the cockroaches of the mammal world, and because of that, there's really no way to completely remove them from the food chain. So while it'd be nice to say that there's no rat hair in your everything,
I need a new set of teeth. It is repulsive. Ever had a mouthful of sand? That's what it's like.
The truth is that there most likely is, and somehow the FDA decided that 4 hairs per 100 grams is the right amount of rat hair. Considering the fact that rodent hair can have fleas and that those fleas were and still are in some areas of the world responsible for the plague, you'll start to see why some people prefer to grow their own food. While it may be really gross, especially if you're eating a lot of jelly beans, yum, rat hair, and bug poop, at least it's not bad for your health. Unlike our next entry, all that poison in baby food.
It's just honey that you get from a cliff and you eat it and you get stoned. It's crazy.
The FDA also allows a certain amount of highly dangerous chemicals in a lot of different foods, like honey for example, which has enough botulism spores to make it basically deadly for children under a certain age.
Be quite a brute of a bee sting, this.
Some of it is just a natural byproduct of produce growing in the earth, like arsenic for example, which is typically present in small amounts in rice, but has been detected at higher than FDA allowed levels in basically every brand of rice products marketed towards children in recent years.
Light, fluffy, delicious, and I'm going to show you how to cook it perfectly.
Beyond that, a lot of the heavy metals that are used in manufacturing, like cadmium, seep into food while it's being mass-produced, and is present even or especially in brands that are marketed as safe, natural, and/or organic. Suddenly, the fact that 1 in 3 people watching this video will have cancer at some point in their life is starting to make sense, as basically our food is full of poisons that our bodies can't break down, like mercury and lead. Beyond that, there are also safe levels of those heavy metals in our water supply too, so if you are thinking of fasting to literally detox, you might have to switch to air. Oh, wait a minute. Carbon monoxide equals fresh?
Oh man, what world again?
As we've seen, there are a lot of highly poisonous and cancerous chemicals that enter into our food either as a byproduct of nature or a byproduct of the manufacturing process. And while that's concerning, at least it's not something that's done intentionally for an otherwise worthless reason. Leave that to the good people of the meat industry, who clearly want people to think that the products they're buying are fresh and safe to eat. Most people look at the color and smell of the meat through the packaging to see how, quote, good it is. And while that used to be a good indicator of the shelf life of the steak, hamburger, or other hunk of animal you're about to buy, it really no longer is, thanks to modern science.
Is math related to science?
Patricia! You see, when some meat is introduced to carbon monoxide, it turns colors that are mostly associated with freshness, while it also basically makes it impossible for the meat to turn the natural colors people were used to seeing for millennia when chowing down on cow, bison, or mammoth. While there are no indications that it's necessarily bad for humans,
at least it's warm.
Carbon monoxide is highly poisonous, and something that if breathed by humans can cause all sorts of problems. The process is called gas packing, and while it may make you think that your butcher is connecting his car's exhaust to today's finest cuts, it's supposedly a relatively benign process. Either way though, considering the fact that the meat also has minimum amounts of heavy metals and at least 4 rat hairs,
3 dead mice.
perhaps blowing toxic gas into something isn't that necessary in 2018.
Let's just stay ahead of the wind.
Then there's the bacteria. One benefit of blasting meat with noxious gas, you'd think at least, would be the fact that it would probably kill any bacteria that's sitting atop the meat and waiting to infect someone in a 99-cent buffet.
This isn't chicken. This is chicken. Want some?
But if chemistry class taught us anything, which it maybe didn't, it's that there are both aerobic and anaerobic cells, meaning that not all forms of life need oxygen to survive. Perhaps because of that, and definitely because of all of the antibacterial drugs that livestock were fed for decades to lower the chances of farmers losing animals to disease, apparently 1 in 4 meat samples tested have some sort of drug-resistant bacteria on its surface. That means that some meat comes with things like drug-resistant staph infections on its surface, which clearly isn't that big of a deal, as you don't hear about people dying from staph or flesh-eating bacteria after a barbecue. But it can be, especially if you work around food a lot, as the chances of you accidentally cutting yourself while slicing and dicing through meat is pretty high.
You cut your finger off.
Yes.
Show me. So get the medic. Medic! Oh, man. Oh, my God.
That would give that bacteria a straight shot to your innards, and is something that could have wide-ranging consequences not only for people who cut meat for a living, but for people who, live. Humans are animals, and there's a reason why you dissected that fetal pig in high school. It's because they have remarkably similar organs to those of humans, and that doesn't just come in handy when it comes to learning about said anatomy, but also when it comes to bacteria finding new hosts, regardless of species. The fact that antibiotics haven't even been around for 100 years and bacteria are already becoming resistant is also sort of scary, but that's a topic for another video. Consumption of sick animals.
I want you to remember you're a great dog, Marley. You're a great dog.
The reality of needing to feed a planet of 7 billion people often means that when it comes to the farms that produce the meat that we eat, things aren't always clean, humane, or moral. While a lot of people are trying to learn more about where the meat they eat comes from and are attempting to make conscious choices like eating locally or from farms that allow free-range animals, the reality is that most meat comes from corporate farms, where animals have pretty dismal, cramped lives that consist of basically just eating, standing, and waiting for slaughter. That was okay back when farms used to pump their animals full of antibiotics, as things like the bed sore-like skin lesions animals get from being in pens all day could be kept under control and free of infection. However, as we've seen above, antibiotics in the meat we eat are not only disgusting, but also could be the end of civilization as we know it. So while it's commendable that farms are no longer pumping meat full of medicine, it doesn't mean that they're somehow alleviating the causes of the diseases that promoted the use of antibiotics in the first place. Beyond that, farming is a hard life, and the difference between profit and loss can be razor thin. So because of that, a lot of farmers will still butcher sick animals and sell their meat on the open market.
When will they stop moving?
See, all that is, that's an involuntary movement.
A recent study showed that almost 15% of feedlot cattle have abscessed livers, and that of the 110 million hogs slaughtered in a given year, almost 80% were given a drug that boosts their meat production, but otherwise makes the hogs really, really sick, with things like hyperactivity, trembling, broken limbs, inability to walk, lesions, and death. So basically, the meat industry is still giving livestock medication, but instead of medication meant to make them healthy, they're actually making them sick, just to improve their quotas. Suddenly, vegetarianism is making a lot of sense. More bugs in sweet stuff.
You can actually eat these just like this. They taste like nutmeg and peanut butter.
Now that you're probably a vegetarian, we thought it was time to ruin a staple of that diet as well. Whether or not you're actually a vegetarian or a vegan, you've probably had a smoothie or delicious frappuccino at one point in your life and thought that you knew everything that went into it, as you saw the person at Jamba Juice making it. However, between the ice cubes, bananas, strawberries, and milk, there's actually a natural way that a lot of companies that manufacture strawberry frappuccinos or related drinks get that beautiful pinkish red color that's clearly meant to mimic strawberries. Like another entry on this list, it turns out that instead of using a bunch of different chemicals, man-made chemicals at least, the food industry uses some bugs, either for things like the shine on jelly beans or the color in that frap. That dye is made from something called cochineal, which is actually just ground up beetles, which actually may make strawberry frappuccinos not totally safe for vegans. Sorry.
I have sincerely been missing out. This is so good.
Tastes like lamb. That's not bad.
We're warning you though. So enjoy your carbon monoxide or incurable staph infection covered steak from a sick cow while you drink your crushed up beetle frappuccino. The anal gland of a beaver.
You've got your whole life ahead of you, and your anal cavity is still taut yet malleable. You gotta do it for Grandpa, Morty.
Most people think of food dyes and flavoring as highly unnatural and something that most food companies make in a lab. But as a couple of other entries on this list show, a lot of companies have never strayed from using really disgusting actual animal parts in their otherwise sweet and fun confections. That's especially true in the case of castoreum, which is a common additive that is used in a ton of baked goods, as it tastes and smells a lot like vanilla. However, it's actually derived from the anal glands of beavers. Now, the question then becomes where they're getting all these beaver anal glands. Are there beaver farms where they slaughter them just for those glands?
Ooh-wee! Whatever you want, Rick. We're here to help.
Thanks, Mr. Poopy Butthole. I always could count on you.
Or are they also taking things like the pelts for jackets, the tails for billy clubs, and the teeth for before posters at orthodontists' offices? It's a whole can of worms. Beyond that, who was the first person to realize that the anal gland of a beaver tasted just like it smelled? There are so many questions that open up here. The most important of which is, of course, why? Sure, back in the day, there weren't factories capable of churning out synthetic versions of chemicals, but now that we do have that, considering the fact that we allow people to blast carbon monoxide onto our meat, I think some synthetic beaver butt juice isn't a bridge too far. Cheese kills.
You see them here? He's desperately trying to
And
bury
would you
back
take
in.
a slice or a spoon?
Spoon, and this is the bit you want here. The maggots are in there. Cheers.
Most people love to eat meat, and while they probably couldn't slaughter a cow themselves, they still can't stop feasting on the deliciousness that is really every kind of meat. However, even the most ravenous of carnivores may take issue with the meat known as veal, which is basically the meat of a calf or baby cow. It's said to be a lot more tender, and thus more delicious than regular cow meat. While most people draw that line of veal, they don't realize the vital role that calves play in the making of cheese. Rennet is a group of enzymes used to digest milk, and it's one of the most crucial steps to making all kinds of cheese, and really the best way to obtain it is by, you guessed it, slicing open the stomach of a nursing calf and basically taking the rennet from it. After that, the rennet is soaked in things like whey, wine, or vinegar for flavoring, and then it's all filtered. It brings a whole new meaning to cutting the cheese. And yes, we've basically ruined every single member of the food pyramid now. We're really sorry, but also strangely hungry.
We're big and we're bad. And we're hungry.
We hope that you haven't lost your appetite for great videos, though. Hit that subscribe button and notification bell.
You can eat these things straight out of the river like that.
Bye, have a great time.
Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.